Provoking facts today, so I'm going to add another one to the list. If everyone in the world consumed, or perhaps I should say wasted, as much food as Europeans, it would take 3 planets to meet the demand. So how can packaging make Europeans use their food resources more effectively? Our next speaker is a man whose job is heightening awareness of the link between packaging and sustainability. He's Julian Carroll. He's Managing Director of Europen, which is the voice of industry on packaging and the environment in Europe. And he's going to tell us why why packaging is the Cinderella of the food branch. So that's a riddle we're interested to know the answer to. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure for me to be invited to address the Save Food Congress. For me, holding this event in the middle of the world's biggest packaging show is momentous, and I think it's also in this day of global food scarcity. It seems that finally policymakers are taking on board a point that my industry has been making for over 20 years. Packaging protects food, and it protects food. It makes more of it available as it does so for more people. This seems obvious to us packaging people, but for decades packaging has been seen as nothing but waste, a nuisance to be avoided. For most people in the rich world of the world, packaging still generates mental images like this one. Images of dirt, rubbish, disgust, or something to be avoided. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. Mine's possibly the world's most misunderstood industry. Packaging is a technological wonderkind that makes abundances for the masses possible. Packaging and the logistics industry that depends on it is an essential for modern trade. Without it, the efficient and safe transportation of goods from their place of production into our homes is simply out of the question. My generation, my organization, Europen, is devoted to putting packaging's environmental impact in the context in which it belongs, that of the entire supply chain of the products which consumers buy. I often shake my head in despair at the sheer absurdity of the focus on packaging waste and sustainability by policymakers compared to food waste. Packaging waste pales into insignificance compared with the losses caused by food waste. Just 2 weeks ago, European Commissioner for Climate Action, Connie Hedegaard, told the Consumer International World Congress in Hong Kong, and I quote, "We could think of tax incentives or increasing taxes on excessive food packaging." End of quotation. This kind of statement is symptomatic of the ignorance of food packaging's essential function of all too many policymakers, even those with an environmental brief, climate change, that's supposed to cover the economy's entire supply chain. As the head of Europen, an industry body devoted to packaging and its impact on the environment, I've often spent years making this seemingly simple point, often to no avail. Prejudices were strong. We who know packaging, we know what it can do, but we often felt like Cinderella, ignored by all, scorned by most, yet yearning to be taken to the ball. Well, today I feel like packaging has finally been asked to dance. The FAO studies we've been privileged to learn about here confirm all the figures about the amount of food being lost from farm to fork. The scale and the magnitude of challenge that policymakers face as they seek to feed our planet's growing population is indeed horrendous. Let me just reiterate what it is we're all talking about, using a single country as an example, India. The government there estimates that yearly post-harvest losses for food grains amounts to nearly 20 million tons. That sounds like a lot, and it is. It's similar in size to that which the European Union exports, or to those of Russia in 2008 or 2009. And we all remember the anguished headlines last year when droughts and fires prompted the Russian government to stop wheat exports. Prices of wheat shot up worldwide. Food became dangerously expensive for hundreds of millions around the world, and for many analysts, these pressures contributed to the explosion of unrest now sweeping the Arab world. We heard references to this already this morning. All as a reaction to the loss of a quantity of wheat equivalent to that wasted, unseen, and mostly unmourned in one country, India. And that's just for grains. If anything, the story is even worse for the much more fragile fruit and vegetable. In India, the estimated post-harvest loss ranges as high as 50%. For 2007, that meant a loss of over 80 million tons of produce, a figure almost as high as the total production of fruit and vegetables in the European Union. Now, India is a big country, but it's all too typical of the state of agriculture in less developed parts of the world. The lack of adequate logistics, cold and dry storage, marketing channels, and above all, packaging, all leads to the waste on a stupendous scale, ladies and gentlemen. But the problem of food waste is not just limited to the developing world, as we've already heard several speakers refer to this morning. In rich countries, it's also happening. It's true, post-harvest losses are minimal, estimated by the EU, as we heard already, to be about 3%. But here, it's food wasted by households that reaches gigantic proportions. In the EU Commission estimates waste amounts to about 89 million tons in 2009, or 11%. I think we also heard as much as the figure 13% of all the food produced in Europe. In the UK alone, it was estimated in 2008 consumers threw away 1/3 of the country's food supply. Even in thrifty, environmentally conscious Norway, 25% of all food is thrown away, and 83% of that is thrown away by consumers. Let's put those figures in perspective. In 2008, the total amount of food the world gave as food aid to poor countries amounted to 6.3 million tons. This is less than 1/10 of the amount of food the UK consumers threw away alone in that year. The world's policymakers are losing sleep over the difficulty in feeding the world. This is the cover of this month's edition of the Bible of America's foreign policy establishment. It's called Foreign Policy, the first ever issue of this magazine devoted to food. What do we find there? Doom, gloom, disaster scenarios. Dozens of prominent people weigh in on everything from genetic engineering to water wars. And in that whole issue, there's not a single mention of food waste, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing. Nada. Hundreds of millions of tons of food are thrown away to rot everywhere, every year. But for foreign policy, that stupendous mountain of waste is invisible. Let me ask you this. What's the point in devoting so much effort to produce more food if that food rots or is thrown away? Why put millions of acres under the plow just to waste the resulting crops? Do a web search of the word world's media. Acres of newsprint are devoted to debating controversial agricultural fixtures, be they genetically engineered crops, marketing insect meat, or expanding plantings in frontier regions like Brazil's Carrero. These measures can at best generate only a fraction of the food that's thrown away. Each year, none of them alone will be able to feed tomorrow's world of 9 billion human beings. In this context, any technology at a stroke which is able to increase the amount of food available to the world by a quarter or more should be seen as what it is, a miracle, a godsend, the fulfillment of a wish as old as humankind itself. That technology exists. It's called packaging. There's the humble cardboard crate that allows fragile peaches and mangoes to be brought in safely from the world's orchards. There are extraordinarily sophisticated multiply membranes that add weeks to the lifetime of cuts of meat or freshly plucked salad leaves by precisely calibrating the moisture, atmospheric composition, and gas exchanges of the foods that they shelter. And there are bottles and cans that allow consumers to buy and store goods that in former times we would have had to be consumed the day they were bought if they were available at all. Packaging already helps feed the world, and tomorrow it will do all the more. Two exciting developments affecting my industry will, I'm certain, do much to feed tomorrow's teeming masses. The first is the growing wealth in developing countries. The second is a technological revolution in consumer food packaging. This odd-looking map of the rich world tells one of the happiest stories of our times, the enormous increase in the planet's wealth over the coming years. For us in the rich world, it means little, but for hundreds of millions, mostly in Asia, it means freedom from want, freedom from the fear of hunger. And that freedom comes in one form above all, an increase in the amount of packaged food that is purchased by consumers. Packaging means reduced waste. Vermin can't get at grains and beans when they are sold in sealed plastic bags. Bakery products stay fresh for days or even weeks in laminates. Milk doesn't go sour and can be stored for days or weeks, even without refrigeration. Oops, sorry, I'm pushing the wrong button, the green button. We'll try that again. Milk doesn't go sour and can be stored for days or weeks, even without refrigeration. And fruit and vegetables can be harvested, handled, transported, stored, and sold properly. All these packagings minimize waste. Two mechanisms can make this happen. The first one we see at work every day. The second one doesn't exist yet, and its absence is extraordinarily short-sighted, in my opinion. The first I mentioned is growing wealth. Once consumers can afford to buy packaged goods, entrepreneurs can build up a chain necessary to produce them. The entrepreneurs then, the farmers, find a market that values their production and manages it very well. The second mechanism, as far as I'm aware, has never been seriously tested. It's for the development aid agencies to help countries develop their packaging infrastructure. Money for this can and should be found in the food aid budgets. Buying packaging instead of food may sound to you rather callous, but packaging stands, in my view, in the same relation to food security as the sewage system stands to health. Proper sewage has done more to extend life expectancy than all the miracles of modern medicine. Likewise, decent packaging is likely to generate more available food than the miracles of biotechnology. We can't afford not to use it. From farm to the consumer's fork, food waste drops dramatically as a country's wealth improves. But this generates a new problem, already familiar to us in the rich world. As post-harvest waste drops, consumer waste rises. As people start buying packaged foods, they lose faith in their own ability to judge a food's freshness. Grandma's old time-tested taste and sniff test is forgotten. Foods that are perfectly good to eat are thrown away for a host of ill-informed reasons, and we saw it in the film we saw earlier before lunch. For example, consumers failing to distinguish between the best before and the use by dates. For perfectly sound commercial reasons, packaging is addressing these issues head on. Two trends are helping consumers waste less food in the developed world. To understand the first, behold the humble salad bag. What may look like a mere sheet of transparent plastic is instead a wonder of modern technology. Up to 7 layers, each with a unique physical properties, are laminated into a sheet of a few hundred microns thick. The result is a bag that provides the perfect environment for the fragile young leaves it contains. Its rate of respiration is precisely controlled. Gaseous exchanges, carbon dioxide, oxygen are calibrated to perfection. The release of moisture is controlled so the leaf neither drowns nor dries out. One layer even filters out UV light, which accelerates plant aging. This cheap and effective packaging, weighing less than a gram per pack, manages the seemingly miraculous, keeping salad leaves fresh for up to 2 weeks. I'm sorry for Mr. Valentine Turin, who I believe earlier had something to say about salad bags in packages. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is a long time to eat some salad. Simply by extending the shelf life of a product, modern packaging significantly reduces the wastage associated with our affluence. And it's not just about trays wraps, or other forms of physical barriers protecting the food. The atmospheric content of packs is hugely important too. Ground beef in a butcher's bag will become unappetizing within a couple of days. But packed in low oxygen atmosphere, it will keep for up to 2 weeks, enough time to have a couple more hamburgers. But extending the shelf life, the product's shelf life is just the first trend in consumer packaging. A second development shows perhaps even greater promise. Clever packaging is now becoming available that replaces grandma's nose in the kitchen. Since research shows that one of the biggest sources of consumer food waste is the confusion between the best before and the use by dates on packaging, researchers such as Strathclyde University's Andrew Mills are developing smart packaging made of plastics whose color changes as the food they protect goes off. The principle's simple. Spoiling food emits a distinctive set of gases which react organically with the packaging to change its color. Consumers won't have to worry about the date on the label anymore. A glimpse of the color of the pack will be enough to tell them if the food that it contains is still fine. This effort meets the zeitgeist too. As Selina Yule, who's sitting over there, will tell us later today, from the UK to Denmark, stop wasting food movements are gaining strength. Skippers, people who get free food from market bins, are getting positive reviews. People know that wasting food is obscene. They want to save it. They want to stop wasting it. This is encouraging. These three developments, better handling and packaging from farm to consumer, extending shelf life, and smart packaging can together generate as much spare food for human consumption as is produced every year by an agricultural powerhouse such as the EU or the United States. It's possible to feed billions of humans and to do so well with existing technologies, provided we apply them everywhere. So why don't we see throngs like this in front of packaging factories? Why are the world's hungry decision makers not beating a path to the doors of the packaging industry? Well, we all know the answer. Conventional wisdom is, to put it bluntly, that packaging is horrible. 4 million web pages can't be wrong. Or can they? Our business is under scrutiny. Consumers, environmentalists, and regulators all have opinions, and these are seldom positive about packaging. They look at packaging in isolation, cheerfully ignoring its fundamental role in improving people's lives. Sadly, this commonly held but uninformed opinion isn't new. Ever since the birth of modern environmentalism in the 1970s, packaging has been under attack. Yet, it's deeply mistaken. More and more studies and documenting the obvious, and Philip Roulet already gave us examples of that. When placed against the energy and resource used to produce food, it is designed to protect. The environmental impact of the packaging pales into insignificance. These graphs are typical of the results that are being obtained today. They chart the maximum allowable environmental impact of a package designed to reduce the amount of food being lost by a given fraction. It's work being done by Helen Williams and Fredrik Wikström at Karlstad University in Sweden. For example, a packaging that helps save 10% more of the cheese it contains can use up to 8.5 times more energy than the current packaging before the total energy cost of the cheese and its packaging increases. And its global warming potential can be over 25 times higher than that of the packaging. The fact we are gathered here today, I believe, is a sign that these insights are beginning to leave the pages of packaging trade journals and are entering the mainstream. But we're not quite there yet. These efforts are sometimes counterproductive and often conflict with the well-intended goals of others in the supply chain. The French and British governments, as well as the EU Commission, are encouraging retailers to develop their own packaging reduction strategies, often failing to recognize the dangers of contradictory demands which are being placed on the suppliers of those packaged goods. All this energy devoted to dealing with the environmental impact of packaging, once it becomes waste, in utter ignorance of the enormous waste packaging prevents. Yes, these packaging reduction initiatives may have merit. The trouble is that collectively they can be counterproductive. And in the context of the huge challenge the world faces in feeding itself, any presumed benefits to be gained from them is dwarfed by the benefits of food packaging that it brings. Educating policymakers about the benefits of packaging can seem a long and wearing road, but the simple fact that the Save Food Congress is taking place and is graced by the presence of the FAO shows that it is not a fruitless task. The next step, I feel, is to help policymakers design policies that support the development of packaging industries in poorer countries. Packaging is by far the lowest hanging fruit we have as we seek to provide for the world. Packaging has to be seen as part of the solution, not part of the problem. Earlier, I suggested that some of the development aid we spend on food be spent instead on helping poor countries develop their packaging infrastructure. Let me conclude with a proposal to this Save Food Congress. Let's go on and work together to explore the formation of a public-private partnership between aid agencies and the packaging industry, aimed at delivering that help to build packaging infrastructure. It would be a win-win situation for both parties. Feeding the world's growing population is not merely possible, it's realistic if we all pull together. With the packaging industry joining forces with farmers, food processors, retailers, and policymakers, the future looks decidedly rosier. Thank you very much.